welcome and thanks for coming today. Thanks for joining in our 6th installment of the Stream Health and Stormwater Introductory Series. We're all gathered here to learn a bit about pathways, both mandatory and optional, for municipalities to take to improve water quality. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we move along, and Amy, my coworker, will organize them to be addressed at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and available for future use on our website. Please also stay tuned for follow-up resources and a survey at the end of the entire series. We hope that you will take the time to fill it out because it will help us to understand topics that will be meaningful to you. My name is Rebecca Zazis, and I work in the watershed program at the Allegheny County Conservation District. In a normal year, you can find me planting and maintaining riparian buffers and working alongside watershed groups. I hope that everyone tuned into the previous webinars, and if not, those webinars will be available in the future as mentioned. The final webinar is Homeowner Solutions this coming Thursday, June 25th, where we will explore options for property owners to help improve water quality and reduce stormwater. If you aren't registered, you are still welcome to do so, and you can find the link on our Facebook page and website. In that spirit of building chapters, here's a quick review of what was covered so far. We covered watersheds and stream basics, that streams are always changing, that waterways have physical, chemical, and biological characteristics that can be monitored in various ways to paint a picture of overall health. Sediment is the #1 pollutant in both PA waterways and waterways nationally because it causes structural, biological, and chemical damages. Infrastructure can directly impact waterways by accelerating erosion or as a highway for direct stormwater inputs. But better design practices can greatly improve their impacts. And nutrient pollution is another natural process that has been accelerated by human activities and produces negative consequences in many sectors of life, including within the stream, on drinking water, human health, and local economies. For this webinar, I'm going to review the stormwater permit, opportunities for municipalities to put into place on municipal property, zoning and ordinances, and with others like community members, property owners, and other municipalities. What I want you to walk away understanding is that your municipality is responsible for how you fit in and to encourage, support, and maybe question what your municipality is doing to improve water quality and reduce stormwater. Another important takeaway is that you and everyone else has a personal responsibility to contribute. These are collective issues and it requires collective action to address them. The MS4 permit, or Municipal Separate Sewer System permit, it serves as the foundation of the content that follows. This is, of course, an introductory presentation, and I encourage you to dig into the details of this thing if you want to know more. However, for many of us, it is important to understand just the basics. The MS4 permit is a national regulation, but it is handled on the state level by the PA Department of Environmental Protection. Allegheny County has 130 municipalities, and nearly all of them have an MS4 permit. This is a permit for a municipality to discharge stormwater into streams and rivers. A separate sewer system is what lies beneath many newer communities. During a rain or snowmelt, stormwater runs into storm drains in the street and from there drains into a stream or river. There are also combined sewer systems. In combined sewer systems, both the street level stormwater and the sewage from your house go to the same system and travel to the wastewater treatment plant. However, the sewer system is not likely able to handle what it is being asked to handle. When it rains above a certain amount, the emergency overflows provide relief to the system by allowing the excess storm and sewage water to flow directly into the stream or river. In Pittsburgh, around 9 billion gallons of untreated sewage and stormwater drains into our waterways each year. So, a municipality may discharge stormwater, but it comes with requirements centered on the improvement of water quality and the reduction of stormwater, and the engagement of all community sectors, property owners, residents, business owners, schools, to help meet the goal. The MS4 permit is made up of 6 main requirements called minimum control measures. I apologize for all of this text, and we will explore these things as we move along in the presentation. Take a minute to look at the headings: education and outreach, construction management, good housekeeping, detection of illicit discharges. These tie into keeping water clean and at a minimum before entering the system. Just as an example of the information that a municipality has to provide, here's a map out of Chester County, PA, which shows the watershed and municipal boundaries, streams, and where there are dry weather flows and no dry weather flows from outfalls. Because outfalls are responsible for discharging stormwater, meaning flow after a precipitation event, if there's a flow after a few days of dry weather, it may be a sign of a connection that is not carrying stormwater and potentially polluting the local waterways. This would be considered an illicit discharge. The second big component of the MS4 permit is the pollution reduction plan. This plan outlines projects that have been calculated to reduce 10% of the municipality's current sediment loading over the next 5 years, which is the length of the permit. Sediment is Pennsylvania's #1 waterway pollutant. As we discussed in an earlier chapter, it causes issues all on its own, and it also helps to transport other pollutants. Nitrogen and phosphorus are also on the list. Some examples of projects that a municipality might undertake could include updating or retrofitting existing stormwater basins, installing rain gardens, stream restoration, street sweeping, and planting riparian buffers. Two of the big influencing factors for projects include budget and effectiveness of each project in order to meet the required reductions in sediment and nutrients. Here's an example out of Bucks County, PA. You can see here that the estimated sediment that needs to be removed in Core Creek is nearly 25,000 pounds. And on the right panel, you see BMPs, or best management practices, that will help to address the required sediment reduction, including the conversions of stormwater infrastructure that is already in place, converting mowed lawns to meadows, a stream restoration, and inlet cleaning. And all of that, it boils down to improving water quality, reducing stormwater volume, and educating and engaging every single person and sector in a watershed. The stormwater entering the system needs to be cleaner, there needs to be less of it, and everybody has to contribute to make a difference. Before we explore further, let's keep a few things in mind. You may see some things in this presentation or any follow-up reading afterwards and wonder, why isn't my municipality doing that? Well, it may likely be due to funding, public will, and people power. Not every community has the capacity to bring all options to life. The MS4 permit is an unfunded mandate, meaning municipalities have to fulfill the obligations of the permit, but aren't receiving money from the state or any other funding source to do so. Other options may come down to a lack of support from the public. Maybe a municipality would like to stop mowing a property as much or put a new fee in place to fund stormwater initiatives. But residents don't like how messy they think properties look, or do not want to pay more money each month, or do not want an ordinance that requires a permit to cut down a tree. Finally, there may be a lack of partners or relationship to lift things off the ground or to help share the burden of costs. Not every municipality or watershed has a watershed group or other community group to help write or apply for grants or support an outreach event or help to maintain new trees or rain gardens. One of my favorite topics to talk about generally, whether on a municipal property or privately owned, thinking differently about how we manage land. And keeping in mind the main goals of the MS4 permit, and for the sake of clean water generally, reducing sediment and nutrients, reducing stormwater volume, and educating and engaging the public, here are a few things that a municipality might do on a municipally owned property. Reduce mowing, let meadows grow or plant them intentionally, plant more trees, install rain gardens, eliminate or reduce use of fertilizers if they're used, and if possible, municipal staff can lead by example by putting these practices in place where they live. Actions like these, simply letting things grow or setting aside a small chunk of cash to plant trees or seeds, are straightforward, don't cost much, and actually reduce costs over time because money is not being spent in labor, fuel, and maintenance costs to mow. If there's opportunity and a budget for educational signage or putting information in a newsletter, website, or social media, public understanding can increase as to why changes are being made on public property. Changes in action and information to go along with those actions also provide an opportunity for folks to learn to do this on their own properties. The potential benefits are huge simply by letting things grow differently and giving people information on what it means. Here are a couple of examples of educational signage for greening projects. A riparian buffer, which is a strip of vegetation that runs alongside a waterway and a meadow. Less glamorous, but no less important, are clean streets, maintained infrastructure, and good housekeeping on municipal properties. Salt is a pollutant, vehicle maintenance fluids are pollutants, and proper storage and handling is the first line of defense in keeping those pollutants out of our waterways. Maintaining municipally owned storm sewer infrastructure and stormwater management infrastructure is also critical. Keeping lines and inlets open reduces street level flooding, and maintaining basins and swales will help pollutants to filter, slow down, reduce in volume, and avoid sediment buildup. We learned in an earlier chapter about the impacts to water quality caused by infrastructure. Streams are always changing, and deteriorating road conditions, improperly sized culverts and pipes, and the actual surface of roads all impact water bodies in various ways. Roads and infrastructure will never go away, but our roads can be redesigned to better fit the landscape and minimize their impact. There are a few things that municipalities can do to help reduce these impacts, including identifying problem areas like undersized stream crossings and roads in poor condition that are draining directly into a waterway, preserving green space. Green space helps to slow, filter, and store stormwater runoff, and taking advantage of the dirt, gravel, and low volume roads program administered by the Conservation District. This program funds environmentally sensitive road improvement projects, such as the recently funded project in South Fayette. So I'm not any kind of expert on zoning and ordinances, and I'm actively working on learning more for myself, but it is so important that these ideas are at least mentioned in this presentation because they play an important role. Each municipality has its own zoning and ordinances, and they can be changed to better reflect a more environmentally sensitive set of community values. Zoning and ordinances impact things like where structures can be built, the width of riparian buffers, the height of grass that must be kept, if sidewalks are replaced, are there spaces for trees, required process to cut down trees of a certain size, and mandatory replacement. For more information on how to get involved, start with attending council and any other public meetings, reading newsletters, and checking out local ordinances on the community website or at the office. There are many, many resources online that break down how this stuff works as well. A couple examples of what zoning and ordinances affect. Most communities have a grass height ordinance. This ordinance is in place to keep up a certain standard and not allow big time neglect in a neighborhood. After learning about the benefits of meadows for stormwater management and how little mowed turf grass helps in storing, slowing, and filtering stormwater runoff, I look at growth much differently now. This island on the left does indeed look messy, but it is offering so much more benefit than the mowed strip on the right. However, the example on the left is likely not up to code, and even if it is, I would bet the public perception is not good. Here's an example of an ordinance that clarifies what a meadow is. You can see that weeds and grass have to be kept at a height of 8 inches unless certain requirements are met, including the location next to a waterway, if a meadow is being maintained to meet requirements. In this case, a property owner can apply with a natural landscape permit through the Parks Department. Also, 8 inches is a pretty good deal. Often a reasonable height restriction is already in place, but we do not take advantage of it because of what because our neighbors might view it as messy. Trees are stormwater infrastructure. They intercept rain and slow it. Imagine the canopy on the far left and all the water it can store on its leaves. Trees slow water, filter water, and transpire water, which is the process where water is transferred to a gas and evaporated into the air. In some communities, a permit is required to cut down a tree of a certain size. trees must also be replaced. Trees are stormwater infrastructure, and by both replanting and preserving them, massive benefits are gained and maintained. Another ordinance example, there are countywide minimum requirements when it comes to developing or redeveloping properties. This is called the Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan. It covers areas such as volume and rate controls before and after development, riparian buffers, and square footage of disturbance, which triggers the need for a stormwater management plan. Municipalities within Allegheny County were required to adopt the minimum requirements in this plan or make requirements more strict. At the very least, a municipality has to adopt the bare minimums. Municipalities can enact tighter regulations. For example, the acreage disturbance that requires a plan in the first place, and expanding the width of a riparian buffer. Enforcement is another important part of regulations. If oversight is lacking, then the requirements may not be followed. However, with enforcement comes the need for people power and budget, which may not be in the cards. I've heard mixed reviews of the desirability of a new fee, and it is understandable. Some people welcome it because it is a dedicated stream of money to help address stormwater issues, but it is also another bill to pay. Stormwater fees can help get projects in the ground. This is indeed a growing trend because managing stormwater and meeting the permit requirements is very expensive and will continue to grow in cost because the lowest hanging fruit of projects will dry up, leaving only the most expensive options open to address. In any case, this is only an option for certain types of municipalities. Boroughs, for example, are not eligible to implement a stormwater fee. Each chapter in this series touches on what a watershed is in some way or another. Water runs downhill and drains to a common point. Sediment and nutrients travel downstream. Land surrounding water bodies sheds stormwater and everything it carries with it. Changes in one part of a watershed can impact other areas of a watershed. Knowing all of this, and that there are multiple municipalities within a watershed, we must imagine cooperating on a watershed basis. There are municipalities that sit at higher elevations and lower elevations. If a higher elevation community is making decisions that have impacts to the lower elevation communities, or on the opposite side of that, there's an opportunity for multiple communities to invest in projects that will help in a big way. We have to think as a watershed. Planning, evaluating, and putting things into action together is essential to making a meaningful dent in stormwater reductions. So what are types of opportunities that municipalities can work with other municipalities on? Shared education programs at a library or community center, purchasing educational resources together to keep costs down, invest in projects together. Maybe it's something bigger and more expensive like a stream restoration, or something smaller like a volunteer riparian buffer planting. Municipalities can also invest together, be it time, money, or acquiring a grant to develop a restoration plan for the entire watershed. As part of the MS4 permit, 2 of the 6 minimum control measures call out education and outreach for the public. Municipalities are responsible for making educational content available, facilitating input on stormwater planning, and extending opportunities to get involved through events like litter cleanups and tree plantings. This is a heavy lift. Municipalities can take advantage of community groups in the area, schools, and nonprofits, if there are any, to reach more people and get more resources like money and volunteers. Reaching people through activities like tree plantings, litter cleanups, illicit discharge monitoring, and as a vehicle to acquire grant funding for pursuits both big and small, like getting yard recognition signs or a stream bank restoration, can be met in different ways through different partnerships. I am sure this list of activities does not begin to cover all the valuable ways that people can learn and participate in stormwater-based involvement. And the more people involved in lifting up and bringing in ideas, the more frequently these activities can come to life. The following slides are a few ways to involve the public that I have not seen as much in our area, or at least I'm unaware of these happening in our area. Yarned are tried and true litter cleanups, tree plantings, rain barrel workshops, water quality monitoring. I thought these were neat enough to mention independently. So much of what behaviors people display depends on what we perceive our peers, friends, family, and neighbors would approve of. There are many studies that confirm this. We are a product of our environment and would often just like to fit in or change our behaviors based on keeping up with the Joneses. If my neighbor gets a new car, maybe I should get a new car. If my neighbor starts landscaping, maybe I should start landscaping. In the example of the unmowed strip versus the mowed strip, it is not hard for me to imagine a neighbor calling code enforcement because of how messy that strip looks. Let neighbors influence neighbors with educational signage and recognition programs. Just like using public property as an educational resource, private property owners can do the same thing. Both of these signs are examples of government-led programs. This is a low-cost or nearly free way for a municipality to document and catalog pollutant issues because they can't be everywhere at once. This is also a great way to engage people to learn and notice sources of pollution like dumping into storm drains, reporting litter heaps, and malfunctioning stormwater infrastructure. Another option to engage residents and help reduce street level flooding and nutrient pollution. I've seen more elaborate programs where property owners can formally register the adoption like you see in this image. And if that isn't an option, getting the message out through newsletter, website, neighbor to neighbor are also great options. I've mentioned in the past that I informally adopted the storm drain outside of my house. I am always ready to help my storm drain out when it needs it. Many hands make for light work. Connecting activities that are already planned or work that needs to be done is a straightforward way of meeting many goals. Educating the public, maintaining green infrastructure, and building relationships. Whatever ways creating a connection board or lines of communication are approached, opportunities can blossom, especially as relationships or even knowledge of needs and opportunities grow. I think we often take communication for granted, that obvious opportunities and events are on the schedule and we assume that people know about it, or how to be a partner to lift it up. And I'm sure we all know that relationship building takes time, but the investment is worth it. Let's take a step back out and look in on the bigger picture. Municipalities have requirements under the MS4 permit, and there are different approaches to expand reach and impact. We looked at working with groups to lift efforts, putting best management practices in place on public property, considering changes in zoning and ordinances for more effective management, providing a way for people in the watershed to report illicit discharges, and focusing on helping neighbors influence neighbors for more stormwater friendly properties. Some actions for you to think about after this chapter closes. Spend some time online reading up on illicit discharges. This will help you to identify what an illicit discharge is, and maybe you feel confident in sharing with, say, a neighbor who's dumping paint into the storm drain, which is what I had to do a few weeks back. All the dog owners out there, be sure to scoop the poop. Dog waste contains billions of bacteria, and it is important that we do our best to keep dog waste out of waterways. We have touched on property management in several webinar chapters, and here it is again. Less mowing, less fertilizer, more trees, shrubs, and meadows will translate to less stormwater runoff, sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, and all the other pollutants that hitch a ride on stormwater runoff, like heavy metals and oil. Consider getting involved at a bigger level. Moving from mowed areas to meadows is really tough in our culture. It isn't normal. Voice your support of best management practices on municipal property. And be sure to help the naysayers out there to understand that messy landscapes are beautiful. Attend council meetings, learn about how things work, what's on the books for zoning and ordinances. Get to know your council members and what they're about, and bring the change. If you're a troop leader looking for projects, if you're personally interested in helping with tree care or bursting with outreach ideas, try to get it rolling and include the municipality in the conversation. This might be surprising to some, but there's no shortage of council members who do not understand all the things that we talked about in this series. Basics of streams and watersheds, sediment and nutrient pollution, best management practices. Council members need to understand how important healthy air, water, and soil is, and how to get there in order to support measures to move forward. One last you can do it I reference watershed groups as a vehicle to help support and initiate projects. If you would like to get more information on how to connect with a watershed group in your area, please get in touch with me. And if you do not have a watershed group in your watershed and are interested in what it means to form one, also give me a ring. I highly recommend the Penn State Extension Master Watershed Steward Program. We're lucky enough to have this program here in Allegheny County. It's awesome, and it provides empowerment to speak on watershed issues and to lead with confidence. I will send a link to this in the program, and the follow-up resources. Here's a menu of how ACCD can help, from technical assistance to farmers, enforcement of construction sites of an acre or more, guidance on planting riparian buffers, assistance in forming a watershed group, and connections to resources and people if we can't give you the help you need. Take-home messages: municipalities with stormwater permits must help to educate and engage the public, take care of their own facilities, monitor sources of pollution, and reduce sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus over a 5-year permit cycle. Just as important, everybody has a part in reducing stormwater and improving water quality. And whether it's making changes in your own yard, to telling a neighbor, to joining a watershed group, it's all important. Okay, well, thanks for listening. I'll answer any questions if there are any, and be sure to register for our webinar on June 25th.
Thanks, Rebecca. I don't see any questions in the chat box right now, but give you a couple minutes to see if you can think of any. If not, like Rebecca said, we'll be following up this with an email for resources that have links that could answer any potential questions you think of later. Yeah. I have one question here. What seems to resonate with the general public on the reasons to improve stream water quality?
My personal experience is connecting stream water quality to drinking water. A lot of people think that drinking water simply comes out of the faucet, and they're surprised to learn that it's all connected. We're getting it out of a stream, we're getting it out of a river, a reservoir, groundwater. So in my personal experience, that's how I connect.
Okay, I think that's the only question that has appeared in the chat box. So thank you all for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday for Homeowner Solutions.